President, I'll be brief. I know the senator from Tennessee would like to close on this matter. I think everything that needs to be said about the details of this deal have already been said. I do want to be recorded for history's purposes before I know what is going to happen in regards to this if it goes through. Iran will immediately use the money that it's receiving in sanctions relief to begin to build up its conventional capabilities. It will establish the most dominant military power in the region outside of the United States, and it will raise the price of us operating in the region. They're going to build anti-access capabilities, rockets capable of destroying our aircraft carriers and ships, continue to build these swift boats that are able to come on us, these fast boats that are able to swarm our naval assets. And they'll make it harder and harder for U.S. troops to be in the region. They'll also work with other terrorist groups in the region to target American servicemen and women. And they may or may not deny that they're involved, but they will target us and raise the price of our presence in the Middle East until they hope to completely pull us out of that region. They'll also continue to build long-range missiles, missiles capable of reaching the United States. Those are not affected by this deal, and they'll continue to build them as they've been doing. And then at some point in the near future, when the time is right, they will build a nuclear weapon. And they will do so because at that point they will know that they have become immune, that we will no longer be able to strike their nuclear program because the price of doing so will be too high. This is not just a work of imagination. It exists in the world today. It's called North Korea, where a lunatic possesses dozens of nuclear weapons and a long-range rocket that can already reach the United States. And we cannot do anything about it. An attack on North Korea today would result in an attack on Tokyo, or Seoul, or Guam, or Hawaii, or California. And so the world must now live with a lunatic in possession of nuclear weapons. And this is the goal Iran has as well, to reach a point where they become immune to any sort of credible military threat because the price of a military strike would be too high. And then they become an established nuclear weapons power. And never in the history of the world has such a regime ever possessed weapons so capable of destruction. Iran is led by a supreme leader who is a radical Shia cleric with an apocalyptic vision of the future. He is not a traditional geopolitical actor who makes decisions on the basis of borders or simply history or because of ambitions. He has an religious apocalyptic vision of the future, one that calls for triggering a conflict between the non-Muslim world and the Muslim world, one that he feels especially obligated to trigger. And he's going to possess nuclear weapons. This is the world that we are on the verge of leaving our children to inherit. And perhaps we ourselves will have to share in it. And so I want to be recorded for history's purposes, if nothing else, to say that those of us who opposed this deal understood where it would lead. And we are making a terrible mistake. And I fear that a passage of this deal will make it even harder for us to prevent it. And I hope that there is still time to change our minds. But here's the good news. Iran may have a supreme leader, but America does not. In this nation, we have a republic, and soon we will have new leaders, perhaps in this chamber, but also in the executive branch. And I pray that on their first day in office, they will reverse this deal and reimpose the sanctions and back them up with a credible threat of military force, or history will condemn us for not doing what needed to be done at this critical moment in the world's history. I yield the floor.
This wasn't just a speech. It was a warning. And not the kind meant for applause, the kind meant for the future. More than a decade later, many of the concerns raised in that moment are still part of ongoing debates, which is why it continues to get attention today. What you just watched was Marco Rubio doing something most politicians avoid. He didn't hedge his words. He didn't soften the message. He put his position on record, clearly and deliberately. When he said, "I want this on record," it wasn't routine. It signaled that he believed a major decision was being made, one that could have serious long-term consequences. From there, he laid out his argument step by step. His focus was on what he believed would happen if the agreement moved forward. He pointed first to sanctions relief. On the surface, that may sound like a diplomatic tool. But his argument was that financial relief could strengthen state power, including military capabilities and regional influence. From that perspective, the concern wasn't immediate conflict. It was gradual escalation. Instead of direct confrontation, the strategy he described was pressure over time, making it increasingly difficult and costly for the United States to operate in the region. Not a sudden clash, but a slow shift in balance. He then broadened the argument. This wasn't just about short-term policy. It was about long-term strategy. The concern he raised was that certain military capabilities could continue developing outside the scope of the agreement, allowing strength to build over time. and eventually, reaching a point where stopping that progress would become extremely difficult. To illustrate this, he referenced North Korea, not as a direct comparison, but as an example of how situations can evolve once certain thresholds are crossed. When the cost of intervention becomes too high, options become limited. Another key part of his argument focused on ideology. He suggested that decision-making is not always driven purely by traditional geopolitical logic. And if different actors operate under fundamentally different assumptions or motivations, then standard deterrence strategies may not work in the same way. That shifts the discussion beyond policy tools into questions about long-term stability and predictability. From there, his message became more direct. He argued that the agreement, in his view, was not eliminating the risk, but managing it while allowing underlying dynamics to continue. That's a critical distinction, because managing a situation and resolving it are not the same thing. Then came the political reality. He acknowledged that decisions like this can move forward regardless of opposition. But he emphasized something he sees as a defining strength of the United States: the ability to change direction. Leadership changes. Policies can be revisited. Future administrations and lawmakers have the power to reassess and act differently. Finally, he closed with a broader point about accountability. Not just in the present, but in how decisions are judged over time. Moments like this, he suggested, are the ones future generations look back on and analyze closely. Not just what was decided, but who spoke up and who didn't. At its core, the message raises a bigger question: are leaders solving problems, or simply delaying them? Because depending on how you see it, those are two very different outcomes. Now it's your turn. Do you think this kind of approach reduces risk, or just postpones it? Drop your thoughts below and join the conversation.